Robots in factories, robots in hospitals, robots in hotels, robots in restaurants, robots in care homes. For years, this was the optimistic answer to Japan's aging society. If the workers disappear, let machines do the work. And if any country could make that future real, it should have been Japan, one of the most advanced, automated, and technologically disciplined societies on Earth. But in 2024, the limits of that dream became impossible to ignore. Most people think robots will save Japan. They are wrong. Automation can keep parts of the economy alive, but it cannot give birth to the next generation. It cannot reopen a school with no children. It cannot rebuild a village where the young people have already left. Robots can replace tasks. They cannot replace society, and that is why Japan has entered phase 2 of demographic decline. The phase where the problem is no longer just fewer people. It is the slow breakdown of the systems that depend on people being there. In the next 8 minutes, I will show you why automation failed to solve the deeper problem, which systems are now breaking in real time, and why this may become the future of many advanced countries. Stay until the end. In small towns across Akita Prefecture, where more than 1/3 of residents are aged 65 or older, one of the highest ratios in Japan, the crisis is no longer abstract. Local shops, clinics, and households increasingly depend on delivery networks that are themselves running short of drivers. A rural store that once received deliveries several times a week may now have to plan around fewer trucks, longer waits, and more uncertainty. No storm, no flood, no infrastructure failure, just not enough people to keep the system moving at the old rhythm. This is not an isolated problem. This is Japan's new operational reality. Japan's transport ministry and industry groups have warned of a structural driver shortage, especially as new overtime rules reduce available delivery capacity. In affected regions, delivery schedules are becoming harder to guarantee, not because demand disappeared, not because the roads disappeared, because the people needed to keep the system running are no longer there in the numbers the system was built for. Supermarkets, hospitals, and small businesses are being forced to plan around a logistics network with less slack. This is what happens when a population shrinks below the threshold needed to run its own infrastructure. The decline does not arrive as a single dramatic crisis. It arrives as a series of quiet failures, each one individually manageable, collectively irreversible. But logistics is only the surface layer. The deeper collapse is happening in the numbers that rarely make headlines, until the consequences are impossible to manage. According to Japan's official population projections, the working age population is expected to fall from the low to mid 70 millions to under 60 million by around 2040. That means roughly 14 million fewer people in the age group that supports the tax base within a single generation. At the same time, the share of people aged 65 and over is projected to exceed 35% of the total population by 2040. The ratio of working age adults to retirees, which stood at roughly 5 to 1 when Japan's pension system was designed, now sits closer to 2 to 1. By 2040, it may be around 1.5 to 1. Japan's Cabinet Office Aging Society White Paper confirms that Social Security expenditure now accounts for over 1/3 of the National General Account budget. That burden has risen steadily over recent decades, and it is not moving in an easy-to-reverse direction. The OECD has warned that Japan's old age dependency ratio is projected to be among the highest of any OECD country by 2050. To understand what that ratio actually demands, imagine a single worker in their 40s. That worker must help fund the retirement, healthcare, and long-term care of someone who may live for another 25 years, while also paying for housing, managing rising costs, and, if they have children, financing one of the most expensive educational environments in the developed world. The pension system was not designed for this ratio. No pension system was. Japan has been adjusting quietly through benefit changes, extended contribution periods, later retirement, and sustained fiscal pressure, year after year. Now here is the part that changes how you think about Japan's response. Because Japan had a plan. The plan was automation. Japan has remained one of the world's leading robotics economies for decades, both as a major producer and user of industrial robots, according to the International Federation of Robotics. The strategy was clear. Replace the labor that demographics were removing with machines that do not age, do not retire, and do not draw pensions. For a significant period, this appeared to be working. Factories remained productive. Assembly lines stayed efficient. Japan's manufacturing reputation survived even as the population aged. But the structural limits of that strategy are now impossible to ignore. Here is what almost no one says out loud. Automation solves production problems. It does not solve social ones. A robot can assemble a car with extraordinary precision, It cannot pay income tax at the level needed to fund a rural hospital. It cannot maintain the population density required to keep a local school open. It cannot be the neighbor, the delivery driver, the nurse, the shopkeeper, the human presence that makes a place worth living in. Consider what Japan's automation strategy actually achieved versus what it promised. Japan's manufacturing output has remained globally competitive despite a shrinking workforce. In that narrow sense, automation worked. But the competitive economy and the livable society it was supposed to support are not the same thing. The factory in Nagoya is still running. The village in Akita is not. And no industrial robot, no matter how sophisticated, generates the local tax revenue, foot traffic, school enrollment, or intergenerational presence that a living community requires to sustain itself. Japan concentrated much of its economic investment in places that machines could reach. The places machines could not reach, the mountainside villages, the fishing communities, the aging market towns, lost not just workers, but the economic reason for remaining inhabited at all. This is the paradox at the heart of Japan's automation story. The more efficient the productive economy became, the more it exposed how much of society still depends on human presence. Japan currently has approximately 9 million vacant homes, called akiya. According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications Housing and Land Survey 2023, 1 in every 8 residential properties in the country empty, not because of a sudden market crash, because many of the people who lived there died, moved away, or left homes behind that younger generations no longer wanted or could maintain. And the vacancy problem is expanding, not disappearing. Most of Japan's prefectures have reported population decline in recent official data. In many regions, the pace of decline is accelerating. Almost everywhere, the working-age population is under pressure. This is no longer only a rural story, it is a national structural condition. So what is Japan actually doing? In 2024, Japan expanded foreign worker pathways in one of the most significant shifts in its modern immigration policy. The focus is practical: construction, healthcare, agriculture, hospitality, and other sectors where labor shortages are already visible. For a country that built a significant part of its identity around cultural continuity and maintained one of the more restrictive immigration frameworks among advanced economies, this is not a minor adjustment. It is a structural admission made through policy that Japan's internal labor supply can no longer sustain the economy on its own terms. The workers arriving are helping fill immediate gaps, but the pace is still below what Japan's labor projections require, and the social infrastructure for integration, language support, housing, and community inclusion is being built in real time, under pressure. This is why Japan matters far beyond Japan. South Korea's fertility rate fell to around 0.72 in 2023, one of the lowest national fertility rates recorded in modern history. Germany faces a shrinking working-age population without sustained immigration. Italy has recorded birth totals lower than at any point since national unification. The difference between Japan and these countries is not the destination, it is the timing. Japan is 5 to 15 years ahead. What is already embedded in Japan's daily reality, delivery pressure, pension arithmetic, automation that works in factories but not in villages, and countryside communities slowly emptying out, is not a uniquely Japanese story. It is a preview. Japan is not collapsing in a single visible moment. It is reorganizing slowly, systematically, and without drama around a smaller and older population than the one it was built for. The trains still run, the streets are still clean, and the cities still function, but the math underneath is not moving in a correctable direction. And the question Japan is now answering in real time, whether a modern society can remain functional, cohesive, and purposeful as it shrinks, is not only Japan's question, it is the question every aging country will face. Japan simply arrived first.